The man my father had hired to certify the film's accuracy was the first person in the theater who stopped watching the hero. Commander Luis Ortega leaned forward and stared at the timecode beneath Ben's frozen image. On screen, my husband hung beneath a Coast Guard helicopter, one hand locked around the rescue basket while black water broke against the hull below him. This time, Ortega was not looking at Ben, he was looking at the numbers. "Run that section again," he said. My father smiled from the center of the panel. "We have a reception waiting, Commander, from the fuel warning." The Acquisitions Council beside him closed the blue folder she had been preparing to sign. My father stopped smiling. I could hear the small metal frame counter turning between my father's fingers. He rolled it across his knuckles, as though every problem could still be solved by cutting one more frame. Ortega pointed toward the projection booth. "The aircraft reports minimum recovery fuel." Then your film cuts to the swimmer entering the water. "That is what happened," my father said. "No, that is what your sequence says happened." The cracked brass ship's bell in the lobby gave one last fragile note. Ortega looked toward the post-production supervisor. "How much source time sits between those two shots?" Tessa Nguyen checked the tablet on her lap, 6 minutes and 11 seconds. People shifted in their seats. My father turned toward her. That material was operational repetition. Ortega's eyes stayed on the frozen fuel gauge. "Then it should be easy to verify." He lifted the printed program, its margin covered in timecodes. "You invited me to confirm this film was operationally accurate. I cannot do that until I see the 6 minutes you removed." My father looked toward me. I sat in the 7th row beyond the press lights. For 1 second, he looked less like an executive producer than my father asking me to help him. I kept my hands folded over my coat. I had not found the missing minutes, brought the raw footage, or invited Ortega. But I knew what lived inside that gap. If my father asked me to tell the room, it did not matter. I had already decided I would not save him. But before I tell you what those 6 missing minutes contained, subscribe and stay with me, because my father had invited the one man who could prove exactly what he had erased. 2 months earlier, the premiere invitation arrived in a black envelope with my husband's name stamped across the front in silver. Ben Whitlock, Into the Storm. My name appeared on the 2nd page beneath the panel biographies. Dana Whitlock, Ben's widow and family consultant. I read the line at the kitchen counter while the kettle clicked off behind me. I had retired from the Coast Guard as a captain after 23 years. During the rescue, I had served as incident commander, named on the operational plan, resource assignments, and final incident log. My right knee locked as I stood at the counter, an old reminder of 23 years spent on hard command room floors. According to my father's program, my qualification was marriage. I called him. "You left me off the operational panel." "You are on the family panel. There is no family panel." A pause. My father knew how long silence could remain comfortable before someone else rushed to fill it. "You will be introduced from the audience," he said. "It will feel warmer." "Warmer than what?" "Than putting you beside investigators and pilots and asking the public to follow command structure." I was the command structure. That is exactly the kind of sentence that loses a room. He said it gently. After 40 years cutting other people's voices, he knew how to make erasure sound like advice. "The film is about Ben," he continued. "No one is diminishing what you did. You listed me as his widow. You are his widow. And nothing else? You are many things, Dana. A program is not a service record." When the call ended, I found the cardboard tube in the back of my office closet. The laminated Nautical chart was cloudy with salt at one corner. Red and yellow grease pencil marks traced a holding pattern, a revised approach, and the 6-minute window where fuel, wind, and judgment had briefly agreed. Ben had written across the lower margin after the debrief. "Your call, my jump, their lives." I ran my thumb over the words. My father had asked to scan the chart for the film. I sent him a high-resolution copy but kept the original. "Paper gets lost," he had said. "So do people," I told him. At the time, he laughed. There had been years when I would have trusted him with anything. After my mother died, my father learned to braid my hair from a television segment about single parents. He packed my lunches badly, attended every school conference, and drove me to the Coast Guard Academy himself. He stood beside the car while I carried my bag toward the barracks. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone," he called after me. I believed him. What I did not understand at 18 was that my father admired strength most when he could frame it. He loved Ben immediately. Ben entered dangerous water. I made the procedural decisions that kept an aircraft above it. My father understood the jump. He never learned how to photograph the decision that made it possible. So when he asked to tell Ben's story after my husband died, I mistook familiarity for safety. I thought a father might simplify his daughter. I did not yet believe he would remove her. That belief survived Ben by 11 days. On the 12th, my father arrived with a banker's box, an unopened bottle of wine, and release forms marked with yellow tabs. Ben's boots were still beside the back door. His reading glasses rested on the kitchen counter as though he had stepped away for a minute. My father did not rush me. He knew when patience could produce the same result as pressure. He made coffee. He washed the mug Ben had used the morning he died. Then he placed the first release in front of me. "I want to preserve what he did," he said. The project was smaller then, a 1-hour public television documentary about rescue crews and decision-making under extreme weather. Not a hero film, he promised, a systems film. Ben would have liked that phrase. The release allowed Rourke Documentary Group to scan photographs, use selected interview recordings, and reproduce personal materials connected to the rescue. My father would consult me on family history and personal context. It did not grant final cut approval, ownership of my service record, or permission to tell anyone I had approved a completed film. I read those sections. I did not read them with the attention I would have given an incident plan. Grief had made whole paragraphs leave nothing behind. My father touched the yellow tab beside the signature line. "You can revoke personal materials if we use them outside the agreed purpose." I signed. His old silver frame counter sat beside his elbow. He picked it up before the ink dried. A festival fund joined 6 months later. Then came a private distributor, additional interviews, and a theatrical cut. What began as a 1-hour public television film grew into the largest project my father's company had ever financed. The first rough cut arrived almost a year later. My father screened it alone for me in his windowless editing suite, which smelled of warm circuitry, dust, and reheated coffee. That version was incomplete, but mostly honest. It showed the storm, the flight crew, and the rescue coordination team. My name appeared beneath my first interview, Captain Dana Whitlock, Incident Commander. When the aircraft reported minimum recovery fuel, the rough cut stayed in the command center. It showed the weather board, the operations clock, and my radio instruction authorizing continued tasking while a second aircraft moved toward an alternate recovery point. Then it cut to Ben preparing to enter the water. I marked 2 chronology errors. The first placed a weather update before it had reached us. The second made the replacement aircraft appear 6 minutes earlier than it actually arrived. My father wrote both notes on a green production pad. "You really think anyone will notice?" he asked. "The people who were there will. That is not the same as the audience. It is if you call the film accurate." He drew a box around the second note. Accuracy is not the same as duration. But order is part of accuracy. My father leaned back. On the monitor, Ben waited beside the open aircraft door, face hidden behind his helmet and mask. "This is where people enter the story," Graham said. The decision to jump, the story started before that. "For you, for everyone on that aircraft." He looked at me with the tired affection he used when I had become difficult but had not yet become an obstacle. The command explanation is too technical. It is 3 sentences. It asks the audience to track fuel state, asset allocation, weather movement, and command authority before they know who to care about. They should care about the people in danger. That is not how viewers work. He pressed play. Ben entered the water. Even without finished music, my husband became a dark shape against white spray, descending toward people who had run out of ways to save themselves. My father watched my face rather than the screen. "That," he said, "is the story." "No, that is the action. To an audience, action is story." I left the green production pad on his console with both chronology corrections written across it. 3 weeks before the premiere, I returned to the studio to record one final line about Ben's life after retirement. The main conference room door stood partly open. My father was speaking to the company's financial controller and an attorney I did not recognize. I would have walked past if I had not heard the number. $920,000. My father's voice had lost its documentary calm. The company had borrowed against the distribution agreement after post-production, and the premiere consumed more than planned. The bridge loan came due in 37 days. The distributor had offered a minimum guarantee of $4,100,000, enough to repay the debt and stabilize the company. But the agreement was not final. They want one clean protagonist, the attorney said. That is what tested. My father tapped something against the conference table. The frame counter, the film has one protagonist. It had one in the last submitted cut, the controller said. Dana's command material makes it an ensemble. It makes it accurate, I said from the doorway. All three turned. My father dismissed the controller and attorney. When the door closed, he did not pretend I had misunderstood. 17 people work here, he said. That does not answer me. If the distributor walks, I cannot carry payroll through January. So you changed the film, I focused it. You removed the decision that kept the aircraft there. I kept the rescue, you kept Ben, his mouth tightened. Ben is the person viewers follow into the water. And I am what? You are the person who made the system work. He turned the frame counter between his fingers and looked past me toward the conference room glass. The metal clicked once against his ring. My father told me the alternative was delaying the film, losing the premiere slot, and possibly closing the company Ben had trusted with his story. He named employees I had known for years, including Tessa with 2 children and Marisol, who had postponed graduate school to finish the project. My father did not threaten me, he gave the consequences names. That night I opened the release agreement and found the revocation clause. I could have withdrawn Ben's photographs, private interviews, and the chart scan. The film would not have survived. Then I opened the company website and saw 17 staff photographs. None of them had chosen the chronology. None of them had guaranteed the loan. I closed the release without signing anything. I told myself I was protecting them. A quieter part of me knew I was also postponing the moment I would have to admit that my father had not misunderstood my role. He had calculated its value, then he had decided the film was worth more without it. The chart was waiting for me in the premiere lobby. It had been enlarged to the height of a doorway beneath the title, Into the Storm. Guests traced the printed route while a photographer moved them into better light. At first the reproduction looked familiar. The shoals, storm track, and final rescue position were right. Then I saw what was missing. The grease pencil lines were gone. No holding pattern, no alternate recovery track, no 6-minute extension. The handwritten note Ben had added beneath the legend had also been removed. Your call, my jump, their lives. The museum label described the chart as the one Ben had used to guide the rescue. Ben had never used it. It had remained on the command table in front of me. My father appeared beside the display before I could photograph it. He wore a black tuxedo and the attentive expression he reserved for opening nights. You came, he said. You cleaned the chart, we cleaned the scan. You removed operational markings. They were difficult to read at this size. You removed Ben's handwriting. His eyes moved toward the guests nearest us. Not here, where? We have press in the room. That did not answer me. He lowered his voice. The original remains untouched. The exhibit says Ben used this chart. He was part of the mission. So were 17 people who are not standing in the label. My father glanced toward the theater entrance. A production assistant signaled that the doors would open in 2 minutes. We can revise exhibit language after the premiere. You have had a year, his face hardened. Dana, do not make tonight about credit. He had removed my work, handwriting and name, then warned me not to ask for attention. I looked at the reproduction again. I understood why he wanted the scan. Salts made it authentic. Missing lines made it tell his story. My father touched my arm. Please do not embarrass Ben. I stepped away before he could guide me toward the theater. Inside, my seat was in the 7th row. The panel sat beneath the screen, my father at the center, Ortega to his left, and Tessa and Marion on the other side. There was no chair for me. A small card on my seat read, Dana Whitlock, family consultant. The press cameras were positioned to capture the first 6 rows. My father had not hidden me. He had placed me exactly where I could be seen without being heard. The lights went down. A deep note from the sound system rolled through the theater. In the lobby, the cracked brass bell answered with a thin metallic vibration. The film opened on Ben standing at the edge of the aircraft ramp. Wind tore at his suit above dark, broken water. I knew the set of his shoulders when he listened to radio traffic. My father's narration began. On the night the storm swallowed the channel, one man made the choice to stay. The sentence was false before the first image changed. Ben had chosen to enter the water. He had not chosen whether the aircraft stayed. The film moved backward from the jump. It showed the disabled vessel, stranded family, and worsening wind, then framed Ben's decision as the event holding every other element in place. The command center appeared for less than 4 seconds. I saw myself in the background facing the weatherboard. My name never appeared. A radio line I had spoken played beneath footage of the pilot. Hold position, 6 minutes. The voice was filtered until it sounded genderless. The caption read, "Operations instructs the crew to withdraw." Then Ben's interview entered over it. We knew we had one more chance. The edit made it sound as though he had rejected the withdrawal instruction. That had never happened. Ben followed command even when he hated the order. Especially then, the film cut to him checking his harness. My father had taken my instruction to remain on scene and placed it beneath a sentence suggesting the crew had stayed despite it. The lie did not require fabricated footage. It only required the audience to hear the right words in the wrong order. I looked toward Tessa. She watched the screen, not the audience. Her mouth tightened when the command center footage ended. Either she knew what changed or had just discovered this was not the cut she expected. The aircraft cockpit filled the screen. A warning sounded. The pilot called minimum recovery fuel. A digital gauge appeared near the lower corner. I knew the number before the film enlarged it for the audience. The aircraft had reached the point where remaining on scene required command authorization, aircraft commander acceptance, and a revised recovery plan. The final cut moved immediately from that warning to Ben opening the door. No alternate asset, no updated weather track, no authorized continued tasking. No pilot acceptance, no 6 minutes. The film treated the jump as if courage had created fuel. I felt the old habit return before I could stop it. Count the seconds. Read the instruments. Check what the story claims against what the system could physically do. At the panel table, Commander Ortega lowered his program and looked at the screen. He had noticed it too. The remaining audience saw only Ben. He entered the water beneath a surge of music. The camera followed him through spray toward the overturned vessel. The rescue itself had not been exaggerated. It did not need to be. Ben secured the child, returned for the mother, and fought through the current after the line struck the vessel rail. I had watched the original helmet footage once after the investigation. I had never watched it again. My father used every second. The final rescue basket rose toward the aircraft as the music stopped. For half a breath, the theater heard only Ben's breathing. Then the screen went black. Applause rose around me. People stood in the first rows, and my father waited just long enough to appear humbled before rising. I pressed both palms against my knees and remained seated. The last image of the basket still burned behind my eyes. Beneath it, my filtered voice had ordered the crew away from a scene I had actually kept alive. When the lights returned, my father took the microphone. He thanked the crew and production team, then looked toward the 7th row. And of course Dana, 300 faces turned. She gave Ben a reason to come home. She protected his memory after we lost him, and she generously approved the final version you saw tonight. Marion Cole opened the blue errors and omissions folder on the panel table. My father continued, the rescue belonged to the people in the aircraft. Dana understood that better than anyone. It was a carefully built sentence. If I corrected him, I would look like a widow competing with a dead man. If I stayed silent, the distributor could treat it as confirmation. He knew both outcomes. I looked at Marion's unsigned signature page. Then at Tessa. Then at Commander Ortega, who had not joined the applause. His program rested on one knee. The right margin was covered with timecodes. My father raised a hand toward me. Dana, would you stand? I did. The audience applauded again. I did not smile. My father mistook that for cooperation. He moved on to the panel discussion, relaxed now, certain the most dangerous part of the evening had passed. I sat back down. I did not know there was a legal review reel in the building. I did not know Tessa had preserved original source timecode. I did not know my father's producer instructions still existed. But I knew one thing. If anyone asked whether I had approved what the audience had just seen, I would not lie for him. The first question came from a reporter. The second came from a former pilot. The third came from Commander Ortega. He did not ask Ben why he jumped. He asked my father, who had kept the aircraft there long enough for him to do it. My father answered without looking at me. The flight crew made a judgment call. Commander Ortega remained seated. Which member of the flight crew? The pilot and Ben understood the conditions better than anyone watching from shore. The sentence gave Courage a location the audience could picture: a cockpit, an open door, a man preparing to enter black water. Ortega looked down at the timecodes written in his program. At minimum recovery fuel, the aircraft commander could recommend continued tasking or accept a revised recovery point. The incident command still had to assign the mission and coordinate the replacement asset. My father turned toward him. This was an emergency. Yes, procedures adjust. Authority does not disappear because the weather is bad. Ortega did not sound like a man trying to embarrass anyone. He sounded like he was putting a tool back where it belonged. My father rolled the frame counter across his fingers. The film compresses several layers of communication. That is standard documentary practice, Ortega nodded. It is. The tension in my father's shoulders eased. Then Ortega continued. A rescue swimmer can choose the jump. He cannot assign continued tasking, coordinate a replacement asset, or alter the incident action plan. Those are command decisions. The aircraft commander still decides whether the aircraft can safely accept them. The Acquisitions Council removed her hand from the signature page. My father noticed. There were multiple command personnel involved. Then one of them authorized the revised plan. It was a collaborative decision. Whose name is on the incident action plan? Everyone understood my father should have been able to answer. He reached for a bottle of water. The documentary is not intended to reproduce every administrative document generated during the response. No, Ortega said, but you described the decision to remain as Ben's. My father drank without taking his eyes from him, because Ben was the one who remained. He entered the water after the aircraft remained. A few people turned toward the screen. The frozen image still showed Ben at the open door. Beneath it, the fuel warning timecode glowed in small white numbers. Ortega pointed toward it. Your sequence moves from minimum recovery fuel to water entry. Yet your narration describes a revised recovery plan, continued air coverage, and a second asset moving into position. That information came from the operational review. I know, I participated in it. The room changed, not dramatically. No one gasped, no camera swung toward me, but my father stopped turning the frame counter. Ortega entered the story afterward, when the Coast Guard reviewed the decisions and communications that produced the outcome. Graham had invited him because independence looked good in a press release. The program called him the expert who could certify the film's operational accuracy. My father had printed those words himself. He glanced toward Marion. The full provenance package has been delivered to the distributor. Marion's expression remained neutral. The package is under review. All source materials are available. Ortega closed his program. Good, then play the missing section. For the first time, my father looked directly at Tessa. She sat 2 chairs away with her tablet balanced on one knee. The public screening system is not configured for raw source playback, Graham said. Tessa hesitated. It can be. My father had turned slowly. We would need to load separate media. The legal review drive is connected to the secondary system. I saw the moment he understood she had brought it into the theater. Tessa continued before he could interrupt. Compliance asked for source comparison capability during the final question and answer session. Marion spoke without opening the blue folder. I asked for it. That removed the last safe direction for my father to turn. He could refuse and alarm the distributor, or allow playback and trust the operational traffic would sound too technical to matter. His entire career had been built on that assumption. People remembered images, they ignored systems. My father placed the water bottle on the floor. Of course, he said, we have nothing to hide. The audience relaxed again. He gave the moment a familiar shape, a technical question, a technical answer, then the reception. My father even smiled toward Ortega. You may find that the removed material consists largely of repeated weather calls and radio checks. That may be true. It did not advance the emotional sequence. I am asking whether it advances the actual one. Tessa left the panel table and crossed toward the projection controls. A technician opened the media cabinet beside the stage. Tessa removed a compact solid-state drive from her bag. A strip of yellow tape crossed the case, legal review. My father watched her connect it. I remained in the 7th row. I had never seen the legal review reel. I did not know whether my voice was audible, whether Tessa had the same materials shown to the distributor, or whether 6 minutes would prove anything beyond the fact that documentaries remove time. What I knew came from memory. The command center warning, the fuel figure, the replacement aircraft still 6 minutes away, and Ben waiting while the vessel rolled lower in the water. And my father's rough cut, where those events had once appeared in the correct order. The main screen divided. On the left, the polished final film remained paused on Ben. On the right appeared a black field containing file names, source identifiers, and continuous timecode. Tessa selected 4 synchronized tracks: cockpit camera, rescue swimmer helmet camera, aircraft telemetry, command channel audio. A 5th window remained minimized beneath them. Ortega leaned toward the screens. Start 15 seconds before the fuel warning. My father raised the microphone. The audience should understand that raw operational material can be confusing without context. No one answered him. The theater lights dimmed another level. The cracked ship's bell in the lobby vibrated as the speakers activated. On the left screen, music returned. On the right, there was only engine noise, static, and the hard mechanical rhythm of the aircraft. Both timecodes reached the fuel warning. The final film jumped forward. The raw reel did not. Ben was already moving toward the door on the left. On the right, he was still strapped into his seat. A timer appeared between the screens, 6 minutes and 11 seconds. The number began counting down. The pilot's voice entered first. Command, we are at minimum recovery fuel. Request immediate return authorization. Static answered. My father's fingers closed around the frame counter. Then my younger voice came through the speakers. Clear. Unfiltered negative return. Command authorizes continued tasking at Sector 4. Aircraft commander, confirm you can safely accept the alternate recovery point. The pilot answered immediately. Affirmative, Sector 4 recovery is within reserve. Hold the aircraft on scene. Secondary asset will assume cover in 6 minutes. Report fuel state every 60 seconds. My younger voice did not sound brave. It sounded busy. On the telemetry window, the aircraft's track stopped turning toward base. A new heading appeared. The fuel projection recalculated. Tessa enlarged the data without being asked. The audience watched a thin line bend across a black screen. No music or close-up explained it, only numbers and an aircraft remaining where the film claimed Ben had decided it should remain. Ortega spoke from the panel. Command authorized continued tasking and assigned the alternate recovery plan. The aircraft commander confirmed he could safely accept it. My father lifted his microphone. That still does not identify who made the command decision. The raw audio continued. A controller reported the replacement aircraft 6 minutes from coverage. My voice answered. Copy. Whitlock retains incident command. Air asset remains assigned until relief checks in. Tessa paused the reel. The sentence stayed visible in the transcript window. Whitlock retains incident command. My father looked toward me. Not because he had learned anything new, because everyone else had. Marion Cole leaned toward Tessa. Is the transcript generated from the source audio? Yes, it was manually verified against the radio log. Show the incident record. My father raised one hand. We are moving far beyond the purpose of a public question and answer session. Marion did not look at him. You submitted this film for factual compliance clearance. Tessa opened the 5th window that had remained minimized. A scanned incident action plan filled the right screen. The top page carried the response date, operational period, and approving authority. Beneath the heading Incident Commander was my name. Commander Dana E. Whitlock. The next page listed the aircraft, replacement asset, and alternate recovery location. My authorization initials appeared beside the 6-minute continued tasking window. The room stayed quiet. My name filled the screen. My hand stayed folded over my coat. The letters looked like something recovered from a burned house, still mine, damaged because someone had insisted it had never existed. My father stood. An incident commander coordinates resources. That does not mean she personally created every decision carried out in the field. Ortega turned toward him. She authorized continued tasking and the alternate recovery plan. The flight crew still accepted the risk. No one is disputing that. Ben still entered the water. No one is disputing that either. My father looked toward the audience. This is why we simplified the sequence. A documentary cannot assign credit to every radio call. Ortega's voice remained level. You did not omit a line of credit. You reassigned the decision. For the first time, the audience reacted audibly. Not applause, a low movement of breath passing through the rows. My father gripped the microphone with both hands. The emotional truth of the sequence remains unchanged. Tessa looked at the helmet camera track. There is more. His head turned. That footage is already in the film. Not this section. She restarted the source reel. On the left screen, the final cut showed Ben tightening his harness beneath my father's narration. One man chose to stay. On the right, Ben remained seated while the aircraft held its new heading. The flight mechanic shouted that the replacement asset was 4 minutes out. Ben checked the buckle on the rescue basket. His breathing was loud inside the helmet. Another crew member asked, "We really staying?" Ben looked toward the cockpit. Then he answered, "Dana bought us 6 minutes, use every one of them." The words entered the theater without music. My father had built an entire film around Ben's courage. Now Ben's own voice refused to let him use that courage against me. The raw footage continued. Ben moved toward the door only after the pilot confirmed the revised recovery point. He clipped into the line, checked the basket, and waited for the command channel to clear. Nothing about the corrected order made him less brave. It made the bravery possible. Beside the screen, my father seemed to become smaller without moving. He looked at me. I could see what he wanted, not forgiveness. Interpretation. He wanted me to tell the room that Ben had spoken casually, that the command structure was too complex, that a father trying to honor his son-in-law had made an understandable editorial choice. I remained seated. Marion opened the blue folder again. "Who approved removing this section?" My father answered too quickly. The director and editorial team made hundreds of compression decisions. Tessa's eyes moved from him to the legal review screen. The edit decision list records the requested changes. "Technical changes," Graham said. "It includes producer instructions." My father stepped toward her. "Tessa." She flinched at her name, but her hand stayed on the controls. For 2 years, he had signed her paychecks and trusted her with footage he did not expect anyone else to examine. She opened the edit decision list. Rows of timecode appeared beside source names, cut points, and comment fields. Tessa searched the interval between the fuel warning and Ben's jump. 3 notes appeared. The first read, "Remove command center track after fuel warning." 2 procedural. The second, "Move Ben pre-jump interview forward." He must own the decision to stay. The final instruction had my father's initials beside it. "Do not identify Dana as incident commander. Family-approved hero-centered cut." Marion looked toward me. "Did you approve that?" "No." It was the first word I had spoken since the screening began. My father's silver frame counter slipped from his hand. It struck the stage, rolled beneath the panel table, and stopped in the aisle below my row. No one reached for it. Tessa displayed the creation date of the notes. They had been entered 3 days after I corrected the chronology in the rough cut. My father had not misunderstood what the missing minutes contained. He had marked the exact place where the truth became inconvenient. Then he had ordered it removed. Marion took the unsigned errors and omissions agreement from the blue folder. She placed the pages together and closed it. Marion kept one hand on the closed blue folder. "Delivery acceptance is suspended," she said. My father stepped toward her. "On what basis?" "Material factual discrepancies, inaccurate approval representations, and an unresolved errors and omissions exposure. This can be corrected with a disclosure." "No." Marion's answer was quiet enough that he had to stop talking to hear it. "The submitted chronology assigns a command decision to the wrong subject. The producer notes show that the change was deliberate. We will not close the acquisition until an independent factual review is complete." The premiere had ended less than 10 minutes earlier. Reception staff still poured champagne while guests expected to celebrate a distribution deal worth more than $4 million. Inside, no one moved toward the reception. My father looked at the audience and seemed to remember they were there. "This is a contractual discussion," he said. "We should continue privately." Marion gathered the unsigned pages. It became a public factual issue when you screened the film. She placed the folder under her arm and left with 2 distributor representatives. No announcement followed, no one applauded. The acquisition simply walked out of the room. My father remained beside the panel table while the screen behind him displayed the instruction carrying his initials. "Do not identify Dana as incident commander." Tessa disconnected the legal review drive. She did not ask Graham's permission. I left before he could reach me. He caught up in the corridor beside the cracked ship's bell. "Dana." I kept walking until we were beyond the theater doors. Guests at the reception could see us through the glass, but the music covered our voices. "You knew what that footage contained," I said. "I knew what it did to the structure." "That was not my question." He stepped between me and the courtroom. I was protecting the film. You told them I approved it. I believed you understood what we were doing. You showed me a different cut. A rough cut, a truthful one. His jaw tightened. Truthful films fail every day because no one can follow them. So you gave them one man. I gave them someone to care about. You gave them Ben because you understood him. I loved him. I know. The answer stopped him for a moment. I did know. My father sat beside Ben through his final night, delivered the eulogy when I could not, and kept Ben's old voicemail on his phone. Ben's old voicemail still waited on his phone. Behind us, the producer note carrying my father's initials still filled the theater screen. You think I erased you because I did not value you, he said. I was trying to save the company. I was trying to save Ben's legacy. You saved a product by deleting your daughter. His face changed. Not enough to become regret. Enough to reveal that the sentence had reached a place numbers could not protect. He looked through the glass toward his employees. If the distributor walks, 17 people lose their jobs. You guaranteed the loan to finish Ben's film. You guaranteed it before the agreement was final. I made the decision I had to make. No, you made the decision you thought everyone else would be forced to absorb. He lowered his voice. You can end this company tomorrow. The archive release allowed me to withdraw Ben's photographs, interviews, and chart if they were materially misrepresented. After the legal reel, enforcement would not be difficult. My father knew it, so did I. I am meeting the production team at 9, I said. He searched my face. Why? Because those 17 people deserve to hear what happens next from someone who is not using them as a shield. The meeting began without Graham. 17 employees filled the conference room. Tessa placed the yellow-tagged legal drive beside the payroll report. The controller explained the numbers. The bridge loan still came due in 37 days. Without the acquisition payment, the company could meet one full payroll and part of another. Canceling the film would trigger additional licensing penalties. No one asked me to forgive my father. That made it easier to remain. Tessa slid the archive release toward me. If you revoke this, we stop using everything connected to Ben. Yes, the film probably dies. Yes, a young assistant stared at the floor. He had not removed my voice. Neither had the sound editor, researchers, or people who cleared footage they believed the family had approved. I placed the unsigned revocation notice beneath the release. I will not withdraw the archive under 3 conditions. Tessa opened a notebook. First, an independent editor takes control of chronology and final delivery. Every event returns to the order supported by source timecode, telemetry, and the operational record. The controller nodded slowly. Second, the film identifies the full rescue structure. Ben remains central to the water rescue. He does not receive decisions he did not make. No one objected. Third, Graham loses final cut and editorial authority. His name may remain in the production history, but he cannot approve the revised film, represent family consent, or speak for me. The company attorney looked toward the empty chair at the head of the table. He owns the company. He can own the company, I said. He cannot own this version of the truth. Tessa closed the notebook. If the distributor accepts those terms, will you continue as a factual consultant? Only through the independent editor. And the original chart? They may display it after the root and handwriting are restored. The controller released a breath. Tessa picked up the legal drive. By noon, Marian had received the 3 conditions, source manifest, and a proposal for an independent re-edit. The film was no longer approved for release, but it was not dead. For the first time since my father began making it, survival and accuracy were no longer being treated as opposites. My father called 3 weeks into the re-edit. By then, an independent editor had restored the command track, rebuilt the chronology from source timecode, and replaced the film's opening narration. The new title was 6 Minutes, The Crew That Stayed. Graham did not mention it. I thought I was saving what mattered, he said. His voice sounded older without a room to control. I stood at my kitchen counter with Ben's chart open in front of me. The laminated corner had clouded further, and one of my grease pencil marks had begun to fade beneath the plastic. You chose what mattered without asking me. I knew what the audience would understand. You knew what you wanted them to understand. Silence settled between us. For most of my life, silence with my father had been a contest. The first person to fill it surrendered the shape of the conversation. This time, neither of us needed to win. The company will survive, he said eventually. I know, the distributor kept the agreement, with conditions. Yes, 17 employees would keep their paychecks, the loan would be repaid after delivery, and Tessa would supervise factual compliance on future projects. Graham retained ownership of the company. He did not retain final cut. You could have destroyed everything, he said. I could have withdrawn Ben's archive. But you didn't. That was for the people who worked there. Not for you, he breathed in slowly, I understand. I did not believe he understood everything, but for the first time, he had stopped asking me to reduce the truth so he could survive it. We ended the call without arranging another. The corrected film premiered 4 months later at a Coast Guard training center. There was no red carpet champagne or giant portrait of Ben. Cadets carried notebooks, rescue swimmers sat beside pilots, mechanics, dispatchers, and command trainees while the distributor recorded the screening for educational release. I sat in the final row, the film still opened with Ben at the aircraft door. He deserved that image, but before he jumped, the sequence returned to the command center. The fuel warning sounded. My younger voice authorized continued tasking. The aircraft commander confirmed the alternate recovery point was safe. The replacement asset moved toward the new coverage position. The timer appeared on screen, 6 minutes and 11 seconds. Then Ben said, Dana bought us 6 minutes, use every one of them. No music covered the line, the jump came afterward. In the correct order, the audience did not applaud when my name appeared. They kept watching because the film no longer asked them to choose between command, aircrew, and swimmer. It showed why all were necessary. After the screening, a cadet stopped in front of the original Nautical chart. The training center mounted it beneath glass. My red and yellow roots remained visible, and Ben's handwriting crossed the lower edge where he had left it. Your call, my jump, their lives. The cadet read the sentence twice. Which part was the heroic part, she asked. I looked at the chart. The call would have meant nothing without the jump, I said. The jump would not have happened without the call. She nodded and wrote something in her notebook. History is not a spotlight. It is a sequence. Change the order, remove one decision, or move one person outside the frame, and true images can begin telling a lie. My father believed the public needed one hero. Ben had understood better. No one brought those people home alone. If 6 missing minutes can change who history calls a hero, share this with someone whose quiet decision was left outside the frame. Subscribe if you believe courage deserves the whole sequence.